What's up, you guys? Rex here. And in today's video, I'll be going over all of the clubs, volunteering experiences, research experiences, shadowing that helped me get 4 acceptances to medical school, including 1 to an Ivy. All right, sorry for the Ivy League clickbait. I got into Dartmouth. I didn't end up going there. I'm at Duke University, but I threw it in there for clickbait. Get views. Can't blame me. All right, so I'd say ultimately when it comes down to it, really your clubs, activities, all of that stuff is what is the most important for getting you into medical school. Stuff like GPA and MCAT, that really determines what level of medical school you might be able to apply to, whether that's like the top school in the country or that's more middle tier or lower tier, DO schools, etc. And so stats sort of just tell you where on that scale. But really, stats don't matter when it comes down to actually getting in as much as what experiences you did in undergrad, whether that was volunteering, clinical experience, were you president of a club, were you active in your community, did you have shadowing experience, did you do research, all of that kind of stuff. And just because I think it's nice to have examples, and that was something I wish I sort of knew more people's story, so to speak, of how they got into medical school, I'm going to be sharing mine. That being said, I don't want you to ever compare yourself to me, to any other applicant, anyone else you see on YouTube, anyone you see on Student Doctor Network, etc. Everybody has their own story of how they got to medical school. But the important thing is building that story, and the biggest part of that are your activities and clubs. There are people that have just unbelievable extracurriculars. They were an Olympic athlete, they've cured 3 diseases, and started an orphanage in Africa, all by the age of 22. Don't compare yourself to those people. They do exist. They're out there somewhere, but that's not 99% of medical students. The vast majority of people are like me, are like my classmates. We're ordinary people. We've done a lot of stuff, and it takes a lot of work to get into medical school, but it's not something you can't do. All right, so this is my actual application from when I applied to medical school. And I'm not going to read through all of the experiences, but if you're interested, just pause the video and you can actually read what I wrote. And sort of while I'm going through here, I'm going to give a little explanation of what I did, and hopefully you can sort of compare what I'm saying to what the actual description is, because you want your description to be accurate to how you would sort of conversationally talk about it. That people reading this aren't looking for someone to be like, I did a little bit of shadowing, it was cool. But also, you don't want to be someone that was like, yeah, well, I shadowed, I basically cured cancer, and I'm the greatest person ever because I shadowed 2 doctors twice for 20 minutes each. You just want to be real and honest and legitimate about it. So, first thing I had was shadowing. And so, my shadowing was minimal. I shadowed like 6 hours. And it wasn't too significant. It was not my most meaningful experience by any means. It was sort of checking a box because I felt obligated to do it. I might make a video later on my thoughts on shadowing. I personally think shadowing is a little bit overrated, both by applicants and by medical school admissions committee. So since I think it's overrated by medical admissions committee, that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. Some medical school admissions committee think it's super important. You sort of just got to do it. No two ways about it. My just personal beliefs. So I was also a teaching assistant, and I actually did most of my teaching assistant experience was after I applied, after I got accepted. I did a ton of TAing my spring semester of my senior year, but I also had done it over the summer, and so it wasn't a huge amount, but it was like 60 hours, and that's a good experience to have. And so then I was also a SAC rep. So that's something where you're a representative of your team and you're chosen usually by the coaches or by the administrators or something like that. And you represent your team to the administration and to the NCAA. So that was a good leadership experience. Again, it wasn't something that was my most meaningful by any means, but it was a good leadership experience. And more than anything, it sort of demonstrated that I was seen as a leader among my teammates and looked upon highly by my coaches. And so next was being a hospice volunteer. And so this was close to being one of my most meaningful experiences. It was really meaningful to me, but I really didn't get the opportunity to do it a ton. And a little bit of that was I didn't have a car to be able to drive a ton, and just it was difficult to get scheduled and stuff like that. So I definitely didn't get to do it as much as I wanted, but those opportunities that I did get to be a hospice volunteer and just really just be with someone and experience their humanity and just that there was something special to me about that end of life stage, and sharing in that in another person, and hopefully making their life better, and making what is for some people a very hard time of their life, maybe the hardest time of their life, and hopefully making that a little bit more bearable for them and their families. So I also threw in there Phi Beta Kappa. I sort of threw this in at the recommendation of my advisor. I didn't even know it was a big deal. I didn't know the letters. I thought it was like Phi Beta Theta. I didn't really know, but I threw it in there. And I actually definitely got like 2 shout outs during my interviews. I think 2 of my interviewers specifically mentioned that. Like, oh, that's so cool. I was in Phi Beta Kappa. Like, ooh, that's cool because you're a science major. Not many science majors. So I didn't know it was a big deal. Apparently it is a big deal, so I'm glad I included it. I was a resident advisor. Not my most meaningful, but some of my most hours for sure. And then I continued through my senior year being an RA. I think that's a great experience to develop your interpersonal skills and also your leadership skills, but also really as far as learning about cultural diversity and learning how to get along with people of totally different backgrounds from your own, assuming you're at a college that has a diverse student body and you're serving as an RA, not in a dorm that is people of all the same race, which is some dorms and some floors at UNC in particular. I was also, this was now one of my most meaningful. I was a chaplain's office minister, and so I was extraordinary minister of communion, which is what the Catholic term would be. I used a little bit more generic language so that it would be a little bit more accessible to people reading it. And so this was incredibly important to me. I think I do a decent job of the actual text here that you can read. But so basically every Saturday I would spend between an hour and 4 hours, probably averaging 2.5 hours. I forget what I said actually on here to like come up with the calculation of 250 hours, but I've been doing it for like 2 or 3 years. And so I would go and I'd see the census, and patients would request visits, or patients from local parishes or who were traveling into the area who didn't have a local parish would request visits from a Catholic minister. And so I would go and just minister to their spiritual needs. And that was a really, really special time for me. And the conversations I had, there's so many that I will never forget for the rest of my life. And, walking in on someone who is there with their wife, and their wife is so thankful to see me because her husband's like moments from dying, and really sharing in those very difficult moments, but being someone that they're wishing was there and being a level of support for them was incredibly powerful. But also it was very cool that I got to walk in to patients' rooms who maybe have been there for weeks, and everyone that comes in has a needle or something to poke them with or prod them with. And I'm just there for them, and being there for them as people and relating to them as humans. And so that was a very nice experience to be able to have, that I'm incredibly thankful that I had. I had just some different awards and honors I had from wrestling. Nothing too significant, like ACC Academic Honor Roll. I think it's a pretty low threshold. 4.0 club, not too significant. Nobody really knows what this is, but I'm proud of it. The Iron Ram Award, they give that to one person. The weightlifting staff gives it to one person on each team per year, so that was significant to me. It's sort of the MVP of the weight room, so I like that. All right, and so this is the next of my most meaningfuls, and so a big part of that is that was a lot of hours. And so this was all of my research experience, and so it was a little bit non-conventional as far as it wasn't in a lab. It was actually doing research for a private startup company. But it was like the best experience I had in undergrad, pretty much better than any other experience. It was absolutely amazing. And so since it was a startup company, all of the interns got to basically do all of the work. And so I was able to design my own experiments. I was leading meetings with the team, developing algorithms, and doing real things that I'm talking intentionally very vague about, because it is a startup company that I think has potential to be huge, and I can't share too much more than that. But I got to have way more autonomy than pretty much everyone I know that was doing internships in engineering and stuff like that, that I was sort of given free reign to, place orders, get devices in, test them, design experiments, do all kinds of cool stuff. And so I learned a ton. The CEO was an awesome mentor. Really, really great experience. But actually, I'll say a little more about that for research. So it is something that was probably maybe a weak point of my application to some schools, and probably a real strength to other schools, that it was unique that I had this sort of type of research. And so some schools might have looked at that and been like, that's, not real research experience. That doesn't count. And that other schools are going to be like, wow, that's super cool, super unique. Love that. And so understand that some schools are going to look at your application favorably, some won't. All right. And then, so another huge activity was just general campus ministry stuff with my church. And so that was the UNC Newman Center. I'm Catholic. That was possibly one of my personally most meaningful, but not very meaningful for medicine. It was a huge time commitment of 800 hours. I absolutely loved it. That was my main sort of just club that was sort of helped me be well-rounded and something I just did because I loved and enjoyed and it's important to me. Next most meaningful, I was on the varsity wrestling team at UNC. That was so many hours. So that was 4,000 hours. And so this is one of my most meaningful experiences in just developing who I am. And that I could talk for hours about wrestling. If you want to hear some of my thoughts about wrestling, you can read that if you would like. But I think basically wrestling has made me who I am. I think I'm tough because of it. I think I have resilience because of it. I truly believe, I'll highlight it here, that once you've wrestled, everything else in life is easy. That wrestling is without a doubt the hardest thing I've ever done. And so sort of comparatively, that makes my life easy. Once I've done that, nothing's difficult. And so I'm curious if that holds true. We'll see. Medical school might become the hardest thing I've ever done. Residency might become the hardest thing I've ever done. Being a doctor might be the hardest thing I've ever done. But so far, if wrestling's a 9, the second hardest thing in my life has been a 6, give or take. So there's a good jump that has to happen for something to come up to wrestling in difficulty. And so last thing is, this is just a paid employment work study thing. Nothing too exciting. I guess it showed time management and stuff, but it was manual labor kind of thing. Nothing too exciting. But I put it on there because it adds and gives a better picture of who I was. And so those are all of the activities I did in undergrad. It was a busy time, not a hugely busy time. I would honestly say that I was way more busy in high school, and I thought I did a lot more stuff in high school, and I'm sort of more impressed and proud of what I did in high school than college. So I don't look at that application and think wow, I did a ton. I was so cool. That I had some real strengths to my application. I had some real weaknesses. That a big strength was some of my unique aspects, that I was doing research for a private company and I was able to do that for 3 years. And then being a Division I athlete is also a huge factor at some schools, and also some schools will look at it and go, meh. And a big part of that is that wrestling isn't a team sport. And so I sort of had to pitch why it's incredibly valuable as a sport in building a team, more so than other sports, in fact. So that was some things that made my application super strong, but also I had basically no shadowing. I had 6 hours over 2 different days. That's not much to speak of. It checks a box that I couldn't say I had none. And then I also didn't have much direct clinical experience, depending on how you defined it. I thought that me being a hospital minister was good clinical experience, that I was sitting by patients' bedside, I was making physical contact with patients, I was being in the room with them in a clinical setting, and so I thought that was very, very important, and I was providing significant care to their mental and spiritual health, which I think are very important parts of holistic health of people. But that's my opinion. So some places might look at that and say, that doesn't count. Or being a hospice volunteer, you're not actually doing medical care, you're just providing support. That's different. So there's strengths, there's weaknesses, and that's going to be every application. So you have to know that there's a reason that most applicants will apply to 15 schools and get 3 interviews and get 1 acceptance, and that's among the 40% that get accepted anywhere. And so a lot of schools will look at it and won't love it. But yeah, so that's enough about that. I hope you found this interesting. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns whatsoever, drop them down below. I will read and respond to every single comment. If you liked anything I had to say, like the video. If you disliked the video, dislike the video. If you want to see more videos and more of what I have become, more talking about the application process, more talking about my journey as a first-year medical student at Duke University, make sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell. And until next time, don't be ordinary, go be great.